Welcome back. Tonight, we drift through the sleepy streets of ancient Alexandria. So wherever you are, however your day has been, you have nothing to do now but rest. There are no twists tonight, nothing to follow, nothing you need to remember in the morning. A city of white stone and salt air, growing still beneath a warm evening haze. We'll drift slowly, in no hurry to be anywhere at all. If these journeys help you rest, you're welcome to follow along, but only if you'd like to. And if you're listening now, leave the name of your city and the time where you are. Wherever you're listening from, you're in good company tonight. So let yourself settle. Let your shoulders soften, and let your eyes close whenever they're ready. Breathe in slowly, and let it go. There's no need to stay awake for any of this. Just let the streets of ancient Alexandria come to you. Alexander the Great stood on the northern coast of Egypt. He looked past the rich soil of the Nile Delta. He noticed a small bay to the west. The water here was clear and deep. A strong ocean current swept eastward across the sea. This current carried the heavy river mud far away. It left the western bay perfectly clean. Alexander knew this was the perfect place to build. A harbor here would never choke on silt. Ships could always sail right up to the shore. The deep water would stay deep forever. He traced the lines of a new city in the sand. The Mediterranean waves washed against the white limestone rocks. The air smelled of salt and dry wind. This simple choice of geography changed the ancient world. The sea would always welcome the ships. The city of Alexandria was born from the shape of the water. The architect Dinocrates planned the new streets with great care. He did not just draw a simple grid on the ground. He thought about the brutal heat of the summer months. The sun beats down hard on this part of the coast. So he tilted the entire city plan just a little bit. He shifted the main avenues off the true north-south line. This slight angle was a stroke of pure genius. It perfectly caught the cool winds blowing off the sea. These breezes swept straight down the wide dirt roads. They acted like a natural cooling system for the whole town. You could walk down the street and feel the fresh air. The buildings cast long shadows across the smooth stone foundations. The wind carried the sound of the waves deep inland. The city breathed with the rhythm of the ocean. The layout made the harsh climate feel gentle. The main road through town was a massive, straight path. It was called the Canopic Way. It stretched all the way from one side to the other. The builders anchored this grand street with two giant markers. At the eastern edge stood the Gate of the Sun. At the western edge stood the Gate of the Moon. These huge stone arches framed the daily life of the people. When you walked down this road, you followed the sky. The morning light poured through the eastern gate at dawn. The evening shadows stretched toward the western gate at dusk. The street aligned the busy traffic with the heavens above. Carts and horses moved along the smooth paving stones. People walked under the shade of tall marble columns. The city felt connected to the stars and the planets. The grand design turned a simple walk into a cosmic journey. While the Greeks built their grand marble streets, something older remained. A small Egyptian fishing village sat on a western hill. It was called Rakotis. The new rulers decided to leave this old town completely intact. They did not tear down the simple mud brick houses. They let the narrow, winding dirt alleys stay just as they were. This area kept its own distinct cultural identity. It felt very different from the wide, straight avenues nearby. The air here smelled of drying fish and warm earth. Fishermen mended their nets in the quiet, dusty courtyards. The old ways of life continued without any interruption. You could hear the soft sounds of the native language. The village stood as a humble anchor to the past. It was a quiet pocket of tradition inside a booming metropolis. The grand new capital grew up right around these ancient, sun-baked walls. The engineers wanted to create two separate, safe ports. They looked at the island of Pharos, sitting offshore. They decided to connect it directly to the mainland. Workers dumped thousands of heavy stones into the blue water. They built a massive artificial land bridge across the bay. It was exactly 7 stadia long. People called it the Hepta Stadium. This huge stone path split the open water right in half. On one side sat a busy commercial port for trade ships. On the other side sat a private dock for royal warships. Wooden cranes lifted giant blocks into place under the bright sun. The sound of hammers echoed across the calm waves. You could walk all the way out to the island on foot. The sea splashed gently against the new stone walls. This bold project changed the shape of the coast forever. The city now controlled the water completely. The growing population needed a steady supply of fresh water, but this coastal landscape had no natural springs at all. The engineers had to solve this problem to keep people alive. They looked deep underground for the answer. They carved hundreds of massive rooms right into the solid bedrock. These huge, dark spaces were all connected by narrow tunnels. They turned the entire foundation of the town into a giant sponge. When the river flooded, fresh water flowed into these hidden tanks. The dark caverns stayed cool and quiet all year long. Rows of thick stone columns held up the heavy ceilings. A single shaft of light might pierce the gloom from above. The still, dark water reflected the rough stone walls. You could hear the soft drip of moisture in the dark. The city survived the dry desert heat because of this hidden network. The real wealth of the region came from the inland farms. The rulers needed a way to bring that food to the coast. They dug a massive trench called the Canopic Canal. This wide waterway connected the landlocked Lake Mareotis to the Nile River. It was a brilliant piece of engineering. Heavy wooden barges loaded with grain no longer had to face the sea. They could bypass the dangerous ocean waves entirely. The boats sailed smoothly down the river and into the calm lake. They pulled right up to the busy southern docks. The air smelled of fresh water and damp wood. Workers carried heavy sacks of wheat onto the stone piers. Morning mist often hung low over the quiet lake. The canal unlocked the riches of the whole country. It turned a coastal town into a massive trading hub. The water brought life and money straight to the door. The shallow waters of the lake held another great treasure. Dense green reeds grew thick along the muddy shores. This was the only place in the world where papyrus grew so well. The tall plants swayed gently in the warm breeze. Small wooden boats glided quietly through the green maze. Workers cut the thick stalks and bundled them together. They dried the reeds and pressed them into smooth sheets. This simple plant gave the rulers a massive global monopoly. They controlled the entire supply of writing material for the ancient world. Every scroll and letter depended on these quiet marshes. The rustle of the wind in the reeds was the sound of power. The city dominated ancient media without lifting a sword. The green shoots in the water were worth more than gold. The mud and the sun created an empire of the written word. The new kingdom needed a powerful symbol to prove its worth. Ptolemy I found that symbol in a daring act of theft. He sent his soldiers to hijack a royal funeral carriage in Syria. They stole the gold coffin of Alexander the Great himself. They brought the conqueror's body all the way back to Egypt. They built a grand tomb called the Soma to hold it. This bold move instantly made the ruler look legitimate. The beautiful limestone building sat at a major crossroads. People traveled from all over the world just to see it. The warm sunset light glowed on the tall marble columns. The air around the tomb always felt quiet and heavy. It became a sacred place of pilgrimage for travelers. The stolen body gave the new streets a sense of deep history. A simple act of robbery turned the town into a legend. The kings wanted their home to be the smartest place on earth. They built a beautiful campus called the Mausoleum. Then they started poaching the best minds from Greece. They offered massive salaries to famous thinkers and writers. They promised them free meals and zero taxes for life. This clever strategy caused a massive brain drain in older towns. The greatest scholars packed up their scrolls and moved south. They sat on marble benches in the serene, lush gardens. They read and argued under the soft shade of the trees. The quiet courtyards buzzed with new ideas and deep thoughts. The rulers bought genius the same way they bought grain. They engineered a cultural capital with pure wealth. The library shelves filled up with the wisdom of the world. The gentle sound of turning pages echoed through the halls. The city became the center of human knowledge. The rulers faced a big problem with their diverse people. The native Egyptians and the new Greeks did not share the same faith. Ptolemy I decided to fix this with a clever invention. He paid his priests to create a brand new god. They combined the Egyptian lord of the afterlife with a Greek king. They called this hybrid deity Serapis. They built a towering limestone temple on a high hill to honor him. It featured both Greek columns and Egyptian lotus flowers. The building looked grand and welcoming to everyone. Torchlight flickered against the smooth stone walls at dusk. The smell of incense drifted down into the busy streets below. People from different worlds came here to pray together. The new religion was a calculated political tool. It worked perfectly to unite the divided population. The temple stood as a quiet symbol of forced harmony. The eastern side of the grid grew in a very specific way. The early kings needed loyal soldiers to protect their borders. They gave free land to thousands of Jewish mercenaries. They also settled many former prisoners of war in this area. This created a strong, loyal buffer community on the edge of town. Over time, this military camp blossomed into a thriving neighborhood. It became the largest Jewish quarter in the ancient world. The smooth stone streets felt peaceful and safe. Elegant limestone houses featured carved wooden balconies. Families gathered in quiet courtyards under the clear blue sky. The smell of fresh bread and roasting meats filled the air. Scholars and merchants built a rich cultural hub here. The sounds of prayer and debate echoed through the alleys. A strategic military choice slowly turned into a vibrant home. The people built a beautiful life on the eastern grid. The town could only grow so far to the west. Both Greek and Egyptian customs had strict rules about the dead. They forbade burying anyone inside the actual city limits. So the western desert edge became a massive cemetery. People called it the necropolis, or the city of the dead. This sprawling landscape of tombs halted urban expansion for centuries. The quiet expanse of sand was dotted with small stone chapels. Tall cypress trees offered patches of dark green shade. The warm sunset light cast long shadows across the graves. families came here to leave offerings and remember their loved ones. The air was always still and silent. The busy noise of the markets faded away completely out here. The living respected this boundary with deep reverence. The dead had their own quiet town right next door. The desert sand kept the memories safe and undisturbed. The grand waterfront changed forever because of a terrible mistake. Julius Caesar was trapped inside the royal palace during a war. Enemy forces were closing in on his position. He ordered his men to burn his own empty ships. He wanted to make sure the enemy could not capture them. The wooden boats caught fire quickly in the harbor. But the wind picked up and carried the hot embers toward the shore. The sparks landed on the busy docks and the dry warehouses. The flames spread fast and destroyed a huge part of the waterfront. The next morning, the air smelled of wet ash and smoke. Charred wooden posts stuck out of the grey water. The blackened stone piers sat quietly in the morning light. An accident of war reshaped the edge of the sea. The fire erased decades of history in a single night. Cleopatra wanted to honor Julius Caesar with a massive monument. She started building a huge temple complex right on the water. It was called the Caesarium. This project changed the whole focus of the town. It physically moved the monumental center down to the harbor. The giant stone pillars faced out toward the open sea. They were the first thing arriving Roman fleets would see. The building was a clear message of power and loyalty. Wooden scaffolding surrounded the half-finished walls in the bright daylight. Workers carved intricate details into the heavy blocks of stone. The sound of chisels rang out over the splashing waves. This temple shifted the culture away from Greek philosophy. It pointed the people toward the new Roman imperial cults. The city was turning its face toward a new empire. The grand architecture bowed to the strength of Rome. The royal harbor soon saw the end of another famous leader. Mark Antony lost a massive battle at Actium. He returned to Egypt feeling broken and defeated. He wanted to get away from the noise of the busy streets. He ordered his men to build a narrow artificial pier. It stretched far out into the calm waters of the great harbor. At the very end he built a small, quiet pavilion. He called it the Timonium. He withdrew to this isolated spot to be completely alone. The stone walls offered him peace and silence. The soft, sad light of early evening washed over the water. He could sit and watch the ship sail past in the distance. The gentle lap of the waves was his only company. The defeated general found his rest on this tiny strip of rock. The grand harbor held his quiet sorrow. Augustus finally defeated Cleopatra and took control of the land. He wanted to leave a permanent mark of his great victory. He founded a sprawling new suburb just outside the original walls. He named it Nicopolis, the City of Victory. This massive project pushed the eastern boundary far out into the landscape. Builders constructed grand new amphitheaters and beautiful temples. The fresh limestone gleamed under the calm afternoon sky. The new streets blended perfectly into the coastal hills. Over time, this quiet suburb merged seamlessly into the growing metropolis. The old walls could no longer hold the booming population. People walked out to the new arenas to watch the games. The air smelled of fresh mortar and sea salt. A monument to war slowly became a peaceful neighborhood. The conqueror's pride gave the people more room to live. The city stretched its arms wider along the coast. Augustus did not annex this land because he loved the culture. He took over because of a very practical need. The massive population of Rome was hungry and starting to riot. The only way to feed them was with Egyptian wheat. The massive grain harvests funneled straight through the Eunostos harbor. This busy port became the most important place in the empire. Huge stone silos and deep warehouses lined the water. Large wooden merchant ships anchored nearby in the dawn light. Workers loaded thousands of heavy sacks onto the wide decks. The smell of dry grain and salty rope filled the air. The survival of Rome depended entirely on these docks. The city lost its independence, but it gained immense vital power. The flow of food sealed its fate as a Roman province. The harbor was the beating heart of a hungry world. The physical shape of the streets eventually fractured under new pressures. In the late 4th century, religious tensions boiled over. Emperor Theodosius ordered all the old pagan temples to close. This decree sparked violent riots across the neighborhoods. Angry crowds attacked the beautiful Serapeum on its high hill. They smashed the statues and tore down the grand columns. The destruction left a massive, rubble-filled void in the southwestern quarter. The once proud temple became a quiet hill of shattered limestone blocks. Weeds slowly grew over the broken marble steps. The overcast daylight cast flat, gray shadows on the ruins. The air felt heavy with the memory of the violence. The city lost a major piece of its original soul. The empty space stood as a scar on the skyline. The changing faiths literally broke the stones of the past. The old gods were buried under their own temples. The royal quarter faced a disaster that no army could fight. In the year 365, a massive earthquake shook the coast of Crete. The tremor triggered a terrifying tsunami that raced across the sea. The giant wave crashed into the northern edge of the town. It drowned the beautiful palaces and the grand temples. The rushing water pulled Cleopatra's royal court straight into the sea. The ocean swallowed the marble columns and the stone steps. The dark water washed over the ruins in the moonlight. The sea claimed the most famous part of the coastline forever. The buildings remain down there in the quiet dark today. Fish swim through the empty halls of the ancient kings. The disaster permanently erased the grandest part of the map. The sea took back the land it had once given. The royal legacy simply vanished beneath the waves. The outer edges of the port slowly disappeared in a much quieter way. The massive stone breakwaters did not fall in a single storm. They were swallowed by a gradual geological shift. Over thousands of years, the entire northern coastline has been tilting downward. This tectonic subsidence is completely invisible to the human eye. But it steadily pulled the maritime infrastructure beneath the waves. The ancient limestone blocks sank deeper into the sand. Algae covered the huge stones on the quiet ocean floor. Shafts of sunlight pierced the blue water to light the ruins. The sea is very peaceful down here. The giant walls that once protected the ships now rest in silence. The earth simply leaned back and let the water in. The city lost its armor to the slow crawl of time. The ocean always wins in the end. The shape of the modern downtown sits on land that is completely new. The old artificial causeway had a surprising side effect. Over many centuries, the long stone bridge trapped drifting sand and mud. The ocean currents pushed the silt up against the walls. Slowly, the narrow path widened into a massive, solid peninsula. Coastal grass grew over the new sandy ground. Small stone huts popped up on the fresh land. The late afternoon sun warmed the wide, flat isthmus. This natural build-up permanently altered the entire coastline. It completely buried the original ancient docks under tons of dirt. The water retreated, and the city walked out onto the new earth. A simple bridge accidentally created a huge piece of real estate. The sea gave up its territory to the drifting sand. The modern streets rest on this quiet accident of nature. The great wealth of the port eventually dried up. The problem started deep inland with the river itself. Over many years, the canopic branch of the Nile slowly filled with mud. The water naturally shifted its path further to the east. This slow migration cut off the direct route to the fertile farms. The wide canal became a narrow, muddy ditch. The stone docks sat abandoned next to the dry reeds. The harsh midday sun baked the empty riverbed. Heavy grain barges could no longer reach the southern port. The city lost its easy connection to the rich interior. trade slowed down, and the money stopped flowing. The economic decline was not caused by a war or a bad king. It happened because a river simply changed its mind. The water walked away, and the city was left stranded. The final blow to the ancient capital came from military fear. Arab forces conquered the region in the 7th century. They looked at the grand coastal city and saw a trap. They worried that the enemy navy could easily attack from the sea. The new rulers did not want to risk their government here. So they moved the capital far inland to a place called Fustat. They left the old metropolis behind its massive weathered stone walls. The grand streets slowly began to empty out. The twilight cast long shadows over the quiet, empty harbor. The bustling markets faded into silence. The city lost its status and its purpose. The people packed up and followed the power inland. The great coastal hub became a sleepy, forgotten town. The walls stood strong, but there was nothing left to protect. The sea breeze blew through the empty squares. The ancient streets you just heard about are no longer visible. They are buried up to 30 feet below the modern ground. People lived here continuously for thousands of years. When old mud brick and stone buildings collapsed, nobody cleared the rubble away. They simply leveled the dirt and built new houses right on top. This slow process elevated the entire ground floor of the metropolis. Layer by layer, the city climbed higher into the sky. Deep foundation trenches reveal the older stone walls hiding in the dark. The daylight shines on the cross-section of history. The Roman roads sit heavy on top of the Greek foundations. The modern cars drive over the ghosts of the past. The city is a giant stack of forgotten lives. The earth holds the memories safe in the dark. The ancient world is still here, sleeping quietly beneath your feet. Where the Mediterranean meets the coast, the ancient city of Alexandria begins with the sea. The water here is restless. It pounds against the shore with a heavy, endless rhythm. To build the great Pharos lighthouse, engineers had to outsmart the ocean. They needed a base that could survive the crushing waves. Their solution was hidden inside the stone itself. Workers cut massive blocks of rough granite. Then, they poured molten lead directly into the joints between the stones. The hot metal cooled and hardened into a thick waterproof seal. It was strong, but it was also flexible. When earthquakes rolled through the coast, the lead allowed the heavy blocks to shift slightly, without breaking. The tower stood firm for centuries. You can almost picture the builders working at the water's edge. They watched the grey waves crash against their new walls. The sea tried to tear the stones apart, but the metal held them together. the lighthouse held another secret deep beneath the waves. The salt water of the Mediterranean is highly corrosive. It eats away at stone and mortar over time. The original builders knew the sea would slowly destroy their work from the bottom up. To stop this, they placed giant slabs of cast glass under the stone base. Medieval Arab historians wrote about these massive, cloudy blocks resting on the sea floor. The glass acted as a perfect barrier. It stopped the damp salt from seeping up into the dry masonry above. Making glass on that scale was a massive effort. The slabs had to be thick enough to hold the weight of a mountain of stone. Down in the dark water, the green glass sat quietly in the sand. Fish swam past the smooth edges. The heavy tower rested safely on its fragile foundation, protected from the very ocean it was built to watch over. Further out in the bay, the water hides more ancient engineering. The old harbor walls were slowly crumbling into the sea. Roman engineers arrived to fix the broken stone barriers. They brought a special volcanic ash from Italy, called pozzolana. When mixed with lime and rubble, this ash created a powerful hydraulic concrete. It had a very rare quality. It could cure and harden completely underwater. The workers poured the thick grey mixture directly into the wooden forms in the sea. The ocean water actually made the concrete stronger as it dried. They built massive artificial reefs that stretched across the bay. These heavy grey blocks broke the force of the incoming waves. They turned the rough open water into a calm, safe harbor. Today, those same concrete blocks still rest beneath the blue surface. The waves gently wash over them. They are covered in green algae now, quietly doing their job after 2,000 years. The floor of the Eastern Harbour is a quiet museum of lost things. For centuries, Greek and Roman merchant ships dropped anchor here. They waited out winter storms in the calm water behind the concrete walls. Sometimes, the ropes snapped. Sometimes, the crews had to leave in a hurry. They left their heavy anchors behind, in the soft silt. Underwater archaeologists have mapped hundreds of them scattered across the seabed. Some are carved from solid stone. Others are poured from heavy lead. They rest half buried in the sand, covered in barnacles and seagrass. Small silver fish dart around the curved metal arms. Each anchor marks a specific moment of ancient panic or bad weather. Now, they just sit in the silent blue water. The wooden ships that carried them are long gone. The sailors who tied the knots are forgotten. But the heavy metal hardware remains, resting peacefully in the dark mud. Not all the ships in the bay were simple merchant vessels. The royal fleet needed a place to hide. The rulers built a secret, enclosed inner harbor, called the catacombs. It was designed to be completely invisible to the commercial sailors in the main port. High, windowless stone walls surrounded a calm basin of water. The only way in was through a very narrow channel. Heavy iron chains guarded this entrance day and night. Inside, sleek wooden warships bobbed gently in the dark water. The sailors could repair their sails and load their weapons in total privacy. Outside the walls, the main harbor was loud and crowded with trade ships. But inside the catacombs, the air was quiet and still. The water barely rippled against the stone docks. It was a hidden pocket of military power, tucked away right in the middle of the busiest port in the ancient world. Just beyond the secret harbor, the royal palace of Cleopatra now sits entirely underwater. The land slowly sank over the centuries, pulling the grand courtyards down into the sea. Divers have carefully mapped the sunken ruins in the eastern bay. They found wide floors paved with imported white marble. The smooth stone is now covered in a soft layer of green algae. Massive stone sphinxes still guard the ruined doorways. They rest quietly on the sandy seabed. Coral grows over their carved faces. Small crabs crawl across the royal steps. The water here is shallow and clear. On a sunny day, the light filters down in gentle blue rays. It dances across the sunken columns. The palace was once filled with the sounds of politics and music. Now, it only hears the slow, steady movement of the tide. It is a peaceful end for a place that once ruled an empire. Back on dry land, the royal family had other ways to stay hidden. The palaces on the Lochias promontory were connected by a network of secret tunnels. These dark passages were carved directly out of the solid limestone bedrock. They allowed the rulers to move around the city completely unseen. A king could walk from his private bedroom to the royal treasury without ever stepping outside. He could slip into his personal theater without facing the public crowds. The air down in the tunnels was cool and damp. Small oil lamps flickered on the rough stone walls. The light cast long, dancing shadows on the curved ceilings. You can imagine the soft sound of leather sandals echoing in the dark. The streets above were loud and bright with city life. But down below, the royal family moved in total silence. They built a private, shadow city just for themselves, hidden right beneath the ground. The city needed protection from the outside world too. The defensive walls were massive. They were built from thick blocks of pale limestone. But they were not just solid barriers of stone. The walls were actually hollow. They contained wide, dark corridors running right through their centers. These internal paths were built specifically for the cavalry. Soldiers on horseback could ride rapidly around the entire perimeter of the city. They moved through the dark tunnels, completely hidden from any enemy outside. Narrow arrow slits let in thin beams of dusty light. The horses' hooves must have echoed loudly in the enclosed stone space. A guard could travel from one gate to another in minutes. From the outside, the wall looked like a silent, empty mountain of stone. But inside, it was alive with movement. The city wore its armor like a heavy cloak, keeping its sharpest weapons hidden in the dark folds. Inside those massive walls, the coastal landscape was completely flat. There were no natural hills to break up the horizon. So the engineers simply built one. They piled up thousands of tons of earth to create an artificial mountain called the Paneum. It was shaped like a giant, grassy pine cone. A winding dirt path spiraled slowly up the sides to the very top. It had no military purpose. It was built just so residents could walk up and look at their own city. People would stroll up the gentle slope in the late afternoon. The air grew cooler as they climbed higher above the hot streets. From the top, they could see the red tile roofs and the blue sea beyond. They could watch the tiny ships moving in the harbor. It was a quiet place to sit and think. The city built a mountain, just to give its people a moment of peace. The ancient theater offered another place to sit and watch the world. Most Roman theaters had a tall, closed stone wall behind the stage. But this one was different. The builders oriented the curved seating, so the audience looked directly out over the water. The Mediterranean Sea became the permanent backdrop for every play. As the actors spoke their lines, real ships sailed past in the distance. The horizon was part of the set design. During an evening performance, the setting sun would paint the water in shades of gold and purple. The gentle sound of the waves mixed with the music from the stage. A cool breeze blew in off the water, brushing past the white marble seats. The audience did not just watch a story. They watched the sea itself. The architecture invited the natural world inside, turning the vast blue ocean into a quiet, captive performer on the stage. When the play ended, the crowds walked home along the grandest avenue in town. The Canopic Way was a massive street running straight through the center. It was paved with huge blocks of solid stone. Many of these blocks were striking red granite. The heavy stone was imported at great expense from the distant quarries of Aswan, far to the south. The builders wanted a surface that would last forever. The granite was incredibly hard and smooth. It quietly absorbed the daily rhythm of heavy wooden cartwheels. The stone stayed cool in the morning, and held the sun's warmth late into the evening. Millions of footsteps polished the red surface over the years. Walking down the avenue, you could feel the solid weight of the city beneath your feet. The street was not just a way to get around. It was a statement of permanence, carved from the oldest rock in the desert. Along the grand streets, massive monuments reached for the sky. The giant stone obelisks known as Cleopatra's Needles stood in a wide courtyard. They were carved from heavy red granite, but the ground beneath them was uneven. To keep the tall stones perfectly level, Roman engineers used a clever trick. They placed hidden bronze sculptures under the corners of the monoliths. These metal supports were shaped like detailed sea crabs. The heavy stone rested directly on the bronze shells. The crabs were tucked away in the shadows at the base. Most people walking past never even noticed them. They just saw the giant obelisk pointing to the clouds. But down in the dust, the little metal crabs did all the hard work. They held up thousands of tons of rock with quiet patience. It is a strange, beautiful detail. The heaviest monuments in the city were supported by tiny creatures from the sea. Just off the main avenues, the air smelled of wood smoke and hot sand. The city was famous for its beautiful glasswork. Artisans made a special type called millefiori, or thousand-flower glass. To create these tiny, colorful patterns, they needed perfect heat. The workshops used specialized, multi-chambered brick furnaces. These dome-shaped structures were engineering marvels. They allowed the glassblowers to maintain different extreme temperatures at the exact same time. One chamber might hold a roaring orange fire, while another kept a slow, steady warmth. The brick walls radiated intense heat into the dark rooms. The glow of the flames lit up the workers' faces. They moved carefully around the hot clay ovens, pulling glowing strings of melted glass. The furnaces hummed with a deep, quiet energy. Out of this intense, controlled fire came tiny glass flowers. They were perfectly frozen in clear glass, ready to be traded across the entire ancient world. Near the western harbor, a different kind of building kept things perfectly cool. The massive Eunostos grain silos held millions of tons of wheat. This food was destined to feed the people of Rome. But the coastal air was humid and salty. If the grain got damp, it would rot in days. So engineers designed the silos for strict climate control. They built incredibly thick stone walls to block the hot sun. They raised the flagstone floors to keep the moisture out of the dirt. Narrow windows let in thin shafts of light, but kept the sea breeze away. Inside, the cavernous rooms were dark, dry, and very quiet. The air smelled faintly of dry dust and sweet wheat. The temperature never changed, no matter how hot it got outside. These silent stone warehouses protected the wealth of an empire. They stood like quiet fortresses, guarding a golden ocean of dry grain. The grain supply depended entirely on the distant Nile River. To predict the annual flood, priests used a secret tool hidden inside the Serapeum temple complex. It was a sacred subterranean well called a nilometer. The deep, square stone shaft connected directly to the natural water table. Steep stairs led down into the dark pit. Measurement lines were carved carefully into the damp walls. Priests would walk down the steps with a single flickering torch. They watched the dark water slowly rise in the pool. The water level in this quiet hole told them exactly how much the river would flood that year. That number dictated the city's grain taxes for the entire season. The fate of the economy was decided in this silent, dripping basement. The priests read the water like a book. They found the future of the empire written in the dark, rising tide of a hidden well. The Serapeum temple held an even stranger secret in its inner sanctuary. Pilgrims traveled from all over to see the statue of the sun god. When they entered the dark, incense-filled room, they saw something impossible. A heavy iron statue hovered in mid-air, floating slightly above its stone pedestal. The trick was hidden in the architecture. Builders had supposedly embedded powerful lodestones into the vaulted roof. These natural magnets created a strong, invisible field pulling upward. The magnetic force perfectly balanced the weight of the iron god. Flickering braziers cast warm light on the floating metal. The room smelled of sweet smoke and old stone. Visitors stood in awe, staring at the empty space beneath the statue. The engineers used the invisible forces of the earth to create a moment of pure wonder. They turned a heavy piece of iron into a floating cloud, suspended quietly in the dark temple air. Not far from the temples, the great library was a place of constant motion. It was not a single building full of silent, dusty reading rooms. Instead, it featured a series of long shaded walkways, called peripatoi. These colonnaded paths opened up to lush green gardens. The architecture was designed specifically for scholars to walk back and forth in the open air. They did not sit quietly at wooden desks. They paced along the limestone columns, debating ideas out loud. The soft morning sunlight warmed the stone floors. You could hear the rustle of robes and the low murmur of voices. The gentle breeze blew through the open spaces, keeping the thinkers cool. The builders knew that good ideas need room to breathe. They designed a space where knowledge was active and alive. The library was a place to move, to talk, and to let thoughts wander through the quiet gardens. When the scholars finished walking, they returned their scrolls to the walls. The fragile papyrus needed protection from the humid Mediterranean air. The builders carved deep, square niches directly into the smooth limestone masonry. These built-in stone pigeonholes were called armaria. They acted as perfect, insulated storage spaces. The thick stone kept the temperature stable and the moisture out. Each rolled scroll had a small wooden tag hanging from the end. The tags dangled quietly in the warm indoor oil light. A librarian could scan the wall and find exactly what they needed. The stone niches looked like a honeycomb of knowledge. They held the thoughts of thousands of writers, safely tucked away in the dry rock. The building itself hugged the delicate paper. The heavy, permanent walls protected the fragile, temporary words, keeping them safe for the next person who wanted to take a walk and think. The scholars also studied living things in the Mausion complex. They maintained a massive, highly specialized botanical garden. It was not a place for leisurely afternoon strolls. It was a living laboratory. The raised stone beds were filled with strange, exotic plants imported from across the known world. Many of these plants were highly toxic. Physicians used the walled garden to study deadly poisons and test new antidotes. Small irrigation channels carried water to the thirsty roots. The air smelled of sharp herbs and damp earth. Bright, unusual flowers bloomed in the bright daylight. The gardeners moved carefully among the leaves, knowing that a single scratch from the wrong thorn could be fatal. It was a beautiful, dangerous place. The city gathered the wildest, most lethal plants on Earth, and arranged them in neat, quiet rows. They turned the chaos of nature into a calm, organized tool for science. Clean water was just as important as medicine. The city's aqueduct system did not just supply the grand public fountains. It fed directly into the dark basements of wealthy homes. The water from the Nile was often thick with brown mud. To fix this, houses had deep, plastered settling tanks, built right beneath their floors. The muddy water flowed into these square pools, and sat perfectly still. Over a few days, the heavy dirt slowly dropped to the bottom. This left a pool of clear, clean water at the top. A servant would lower a wooden bucket to draw up the fresh water. The basement rooms were small, cool and quiet. A single oil lamp usually lit the damp stone walls. The water rested in the dark, slowly cleaning itself in the silence. It was a simple, patient system. The house just waited for the dirt to fall away. For the rest of the city, water was stored in massive underground reservoirs. The El Nabih cistern is a beautiful patchwork of recycled history. Engineers had to support a huge, vaulted ceiling over the deep water. Instead of cutting new stone, they salvaged mismatched columns from older, demolished temples. They gathered marble and granite pillars of all different sizes and styles. They stood them up in the dark, flooded chamber. It looks like a chaotic sunken forest of stone. A single shaft of light falls from a grate in the ceiling. It catches the ripples on the dark water. The different carved capitals sit quietly in the shadows. Some are smooth, while others are carved with intricate leaves. The builders did not care if they matched. They just needed them to hold up the roof. They built a vital piece of infrastructure out of the broken pieces of the past. Some pieces of the past remain a complete mystery. Hidden in the Latin cemetery is a structure known as the alabaster tomb. It is a massive monolithic block of pure, translucent stone. The pale rock weighs many tons. It was carved with perfect, smooth precision. When the soft daylight hits it, the stone almost seems to glow from the inside. It sits quietly in a dusty trench, surrounded by ordinary dirt. It is the only surviving piece of what was likely a spectacular royal mausoleum. But its true origins are completely lost to time. Nobody knows exactly who was meant to rest inside it. The heavy block just waits in the quiet cemetery. It is a beautiful, empty shell. The builders went to incredible lengths to shape this rare, glowing stone. Now, it is just a silent ghost, holding on to a secret that the city forgot a long time ago. Beneath a modern neighborhood, the catacombs of Kom el Shukafa hold more secrets of the dead. The entrance is a massive circular stone staircase, spiraling down into the deep bedrock. But the steps were not really built for walking. The engineers designed the stairs with a very wide, gentle slope. They built it specifically, so bodies could be carefully lowered down on ropes. The descent into the dark was slow and respectful. Flickering oil lamps lit the rough rock walls. The air grew cooler with every step down into the earth. You can imagine the soft sound of thick ropes sliding against the stone. The builders made the journey as smooth as possible for the heavy wooden coffins. They carved a gentle path into the hard rock. The staircase was a quiet, practical bridge between the bright, noisy streets above and the silent, eternal resting place deep below the ground. Down in the catacombs, the architecture shows a strange blending of different worlds. The people here mixed their cultures even in death. Carved into the tomb walls is a detailed image of Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god who guides the dead. He has his traditional jackal head. but the artist gave him a surprising new outfit. The god is depicted wearing the heavy breastplate armor of a Roman legionary. He also wears the flowing, short cloak of a Greek soldier. The warm, flickering torchlight dances across the carved stone. The figure stands quietly in the shadows, guarding the tomb. It is a beautiful, bizarre mix of traditions. The grieving families did not want to choose just one god to protect their loved ones. So, they combined them all into one powerful guardian. They dressed an ancient desert spirit in the modern armor of the empire, hoping to keep the dark away. The families did not just leave their dead in the dark. They came down to visit them. The catacombs contain a hidden dining room, called the triclinium. It is a subterranean space, carved directly from the rock. It features 3 wide stone benches arranged in a U-shape. Here, grieving relatives would descend underground to hold elaborate banquets. They ate and drank in the quiet presence of their dead ancestors. The dim oil lamps cast a warm glow over the stone tables. The air smelled of wine, roasted food, and damp earth. It was a way to share one last meal together. When the feast was over, they did not take their dishes home. They smashed the terracotta wine jugs on the floor. They left the shattered pieces behind in the dust. The broken clay still litters the ground today, a quiet reminder of a family dinner held deep in the earth. The day in ancient Alexandria begins with the gentle turning of wood. Deep below the streets, a vast network of stone cisterns holds the city's lifeblood. Above them, blindfolded oxen walk in quiet, endless circles. They turn massive wooden wheels known as scribes. These heavy gears lift fresh, cool water from the dark bedrock. The water rises in clay pots, spilling into channels that feed the sunlit streets. It flows into private homes and public fountains. You can hear the steady creak of timber echoing through the shaded courtyards. This slow, rhythmic motion sets the pace for the morning. The city does not rush to wake up. It rises gradually, matching the patient steps of the oxen. The air is still cool, and the stone pavements are damp. This hidden labor keeps the desert at bay. It is a quiet, mechanical heartbeat that sustains 1,000,000 lives. The rhythm of civic life is measured by the steady dripping of water. In the public squares, massive stone and bronze clocks stand in the shade. These are the clepsydrae. They are ornate vessels that slowly empty, drop by drop. They provide a silent, continuous measurement of time. The falling water dictates the length of political speeches. It marks the opening and closing of the market hours. People pause by the marble porticos, just to watch the water level fall. There are no bells or chimes to rush the day. Time simply flows from one basin to another. The calm afternoon light catches the bronze edges of the clock. It is a peaceful way to track the passing hours. The city moves to this fluid, unhurried tempo. You can almost feel the collective breath of the streets slowing down. The water falls, and the day gently moves forward. Soon, the industrial quarters wake up to a very specific scent. The air fills with the smell of drying glue and fresh river reeds. Hundreds of workers spend their early hours in open, sunny courtyards. They unroll wet, pale strips of papyrus across long wooden tables. The workers pound the plant fibers flat with heavy wooden mallets. Then, they leave the sheets to dry under the bright morning sun. This simple, repetitive labor produces the paper that runs the ancient world. The sound of the mallets creates a dull, rhythmic thud across the district. It is a steady, comforting noise. The wet reeds glisten in the light, before turning into crisp, blank scrolls. Every great poem and tax record begins right here. The workers move with practiced ease, turning raw plants into history. The morning sun warms the stone walls, baking the dampness out of the fresh paper. Down by the eastern harbor, the morning brings a chaotic display of the sea's bounty. Fishermen tie their wooden boats to the wet stone piers. They unload their overnight catch directly onto the docks. Woven baskets overflow with silver scales and dark, twisting shapes. You can see massive tuna resting beside spiky sea urchins. Long moray eels slide across the damp stones. The fishermen shout their prices over the sharp cries of the gulls. The air smells strongly of salt seaweed and cold water. Buyers move quickly through the crowds, inspecting the strange, fresh fish. The cool dawn light reflects off the wet pavement. It is a loud, vibrant start to the day. Yet, there is a familiar comfort in this daily ritual. The sea always provides, and the city always waits for it. The boats bob gently in the water, resting after a long night of work. A short walk inland brings you to the central market plaza. The agora is a wide, open space surrounded by tall marble columns. It is a chaotic symphony of different languages. This place is a true global crossroads. A simple stroll means hearing Greek merchants haggling with Egyptian farmers. You might catch the rough sounds of Aramaic-speaking traders. Nearby, Latin-speaking soldiers share jokes in the shade. All these voices echo off the smooth stone porticos. The dust on the ground holds 1,000 overlapping footprints. Discarded fruit leaves sweet, sharp smells in the warm air. People from every corner of the known world meet here. They trade goods, share news and argue over prices. It is a dense, colorful tapestry of human life. The sheer variety of sounds is overwhelming but deeply fascinating. The market hums with a shared restless energy that connects distant empires to this single square. At the edge of town, the desert meets the city walls. The arrival of deep sand caravans brings exotic sounds to the Sun Gate. Traders emerge from the vast Sahara, leading strange and beautiful animals. You can see the long, graceful necks of giraffes swaying above the crowds. Ostriches step nervously through the massive stone archway. Caged leopards pace in the shadows, their spotted coats catching the warm light. These creatures are destined for the royal zoo or distant arenas. The dust kicks up around their heavy feet, glowing in the afternoon sun. The guards watch quietly as the long procession enters the streets. The smell of dry earth and animal fur fills the air. It is a surreal sight against the rigid geometry of the city. The wildness of the deep continent briefly spills onto the paved roads. The gate stands open, welcoming the unknown into the familiar. Deeper inside the trading quarter, the air changes completely. The spice markets smell intensely of distant, arid lands. Merchants arriving from the Red Sea set up their stalls here. They carefully weigh out rough chunks of frankincense and myrrh. They use delicate, small bronze scales to measure the precious resins. A fine golden dust coats the worn stone counters. The scent is heavy, sweet, and deeply intoxicating. It clings to the clothes of everyone who walks past. The merchants speak in low, serious tones as they trade. The warm afternoon sun catches the reddish hues of the myrrh. It feels like stepping into a quiet, sacred space. The noise of the city seems to fade behind the thick perfume. People linger here, breathing in the rich, smoky aromas. The resin chunks look like rough jewels scattered across the tables. They hold the captured heat of the southern deserts. Back at the waterfront, a massive departure draws a crowd. The grain ships are preparing to leave for Rome. These vessels are so gargantuan, they require a crew of hundreds. A ship like the famous Isis towers over the stone piers. Thick, heavy hemp ropes are coiled on the docks. When the sailors finally untie them, a cheer goes up. The sheer scale of the wooden hull is hard to comprehend. Crowds gather just to watch the massive linen sails catch the wind. The fabric snaps tight, pulling the floating giant forward. It is a city-wide spectacle of engineering and daring. The perilous journey across the sea begins with this slow, majestic movement. The water churns white behind the heavy wooden rudder. People stand on the harbor walls, waving until the ship is just a speck. The harbor feels strangely empty once the great vessel finally sails away. In another part of the industrial zone, the work is far less glamorous. This area is defined by a pungent, rotting smell. Here, dyers work with thousands of small murex sea snails. They crush the shells in massive, stained stone vats. The crushed snails are left to ferment under the harsh midday sun. This foul-smelling process produces something incredibly precious. It creates the famous Tyrian purple dye, used for royal clothing. The dark, purplish liquid stains the hands of the workers. It seeps into the dusty ground of the open-air courtyards. The contrast is striking. Such a terrible smell creates the most beautiful color in the world. The workers move slowly in the sweltering heat, stirring the thick vats. The deep, purple pigment catches the light, rich and vibrant. It is a quiet, dirty job that clothes emperors. The smell lingers in the air, a heavy reminder of the cost. Nearby, artisans work in a rhythm dictated by extreme heat. The glassmakers melt silica and natron in roaring furnaces. The workshops are sweltering, glowing with ambient orange light. Once the sand melts, the workers must move very quickly. They gather molten blobs of glass on the ends of long iron tubes. They blow and shape the glowing orange material before it cools. The glass hardens rapidly, turning into delicate, translucent vessels. The artisans spin the tubes with practiced, fluid motions. It is a dangerous, beautiful dance with liquid fire. The heat radiates off the stone benches, warming the entire street. You can hear the soft roar of the flames, and the clinking of finished glass. The city is famous for these fragile, perfect creations. The workers wipe sweat from their faces, entirely focused on the glowing shapes. The cooling sand slowly becomes a permanent, frozen drop of light. That same intense heat serves a different purpose beneath the public baths. The marble floors above are kept perfectly warm by hidden labor. Down in the dark, stifling hypocaust chambers, slaves work tirelessly. They feed bundles of dry desert scrub into roaring brick furnaces. The fire burns constantly, heating the air that flows between small brick pillars. This hot air warms the stone floors and the water in the pools above. The basement is a low, dark space filled with intense, glowing firelight. The air down here is thick with smoke and ash. It is a hidden world of soot and sweat. Above them, citizens relax in perfectly heated clear water. The contrast between the dark furnaces and the bright baths is sharp. The steady crackle of burning brush echoes through the brick tunnels. It is a continuous, unseen effort that brings comfort to the city above. Far from the noise of the furnaces, the mind finds quiet focus. The copying of books is a slow, meticulous labor. In the scriptoriums, scribes sit cross-legged on the floor for hours. They work by the flickering, warm light of small oil lamps. Each scribe uses a carved reed pen, dipped in dark ink. The ink is a simple mix of soot and gum arabic. They carefully transcribe ancient texts onto fresh, blank papyrus. The room is completely silent, except for the soft scratching of reeds. The scribes do not rush. A single mistake could ruin days of careful work. The wooden desks hold the accumulated knowledge of the world. The air smells faintly of lamp oil and dry paper. It is a peaceful, meditative environment. The scribes preserve history, one careful letter at a time. The soft light casts long, still shadows against the smooth walls. Across the water, another kind of translation requires total isolation. On the island of Pharos, small, austere, stone rooms face the sea. According to legend, 72 scholars sit in these separate, quiet cells. They work independently for 72 days. Their goal is to translate the Hebrew Bible into Greek. The bright, natural daylight pours through single, narrow windows. The rooms contain only simple wooden desks and scattered scrolls. The scholars stare out at the blue water, lost in deep thought. They are bridging two ancient cultures with ink and papyrus. The sound of the waves provides a constant, calming background noise. There are no distractions here, only the weight of the words. The isolation allows for absolute, unbroken concentration. The finished text will be known as the Septuagint. It is a monumental task, achieved in the quietest of spaces. The sea breeze cools the small, sunlit rooms. In the necropolis, tradition and art blend in a quiet, dusty space. The mummification workshops handle the dead with deep respect. Priests quietly perform the ancient, careful rites of embalming. In the very next room, Greek-trained painters are hard at work. They use hot, colored wax to paint incredibly lifelike portraits. This technique is known as encaustic painting. The artists capture the exact likeness of the deceased on wooden panels. These modern-looking faces will be placed over the mummy's wrapped head. The workshop smells of melting wax, cedar oil, and dry linen. Soft daylight illuminates the stunningly realistic faces on the wooden easels. It is a strange, beautiful meeting of two different worlds. The Egyptian reverence for eternity meets the Greek love of realism. The painters work in silence, honoring the lives of those who have passed. The wax cools quickly, freezing a perfect memory in vibrant color. During the festival of Adonia, the flat clay rooftops transform. They briefly become temporary, dying gardens. Women carry broken pottery shards up the stairs. They plant quick-growing seeds in the shallow dirt. The harsh summer sun beats down on the exposed roofs. The small green sprouts grow fast, but they cannot survive the heat. They quickly wither and turn brown in the baking light. This is a deliberate ritual. It mourns the brief, tragic life of the god Adonis. The rooftops are dotted with these fragile, wilted offerings. The midday sun casts sharp shadows across the baked clay. It is a quiet, personal act of remembrance. The women tend to the dying plants with gentle care. The city's skyline briefly turns green before fading back to dust. It is a beautiful, fleeting tradition that marks the peak of summer. The dry wind scatters the dead leaves across the tiles. Inside the homes below, a different kind of ritual takes place. Many families share their space with a quiet, slithering protector. It is common to keep a harmless snake living in the walls. Locals call this snake the agathos daemon, or the good spirit. The snake hides in the cool, dark cracks of the masonry. In the rustic stone kitchens, residents leave out small terracotta bowls. They fill the bowls with fresh milk for the hidden guest. This simple offering is meant to ensure the household's good fortune. The dim, ambient daylight filters into the quiet kitchen corners. The snake rarely shows itself, but its presence is always felt. It is a peaceful coexistence between humans and nature. The milk sits quietly on the floor, waiting in the shadows. This small act of care brings a sense of safety to the home. The house feels watched over and protected. Out on the streets, small acts of devotion mark the daily commute. Locals pause at small arched niches carved into the limestone walls. These are neighborhood shrines, dedicated to local deities. People leave tiny offerings as they walk by. You might see a few wilted flowers or a tiny terracotta figurine. Sometimes, a person pours a few drops of wine onto the stone. A small flickering oil lamp often burns in the niche. These shrines are quiet anchors in the busy city. They offer a moment of pause before the day truly begins. The weathered stone is stained from years of spilled wine and oil. It is a deeply personal, everyday kind of faith. No grand temples are needed for these quick, silent prayers. The shrines blend perfectly into the texture of the neighborhood. They are small pockets of peace, carved right into the city walls. As the heat finally breaks, the evening promenade begins. This is a daily ritual of seeing and being seen. Citizens stroll down the Canopic Way, the city's grandest avenue. The street is over 100 feet wide and paved with smooth stone. It is shaded by continuous tall marble colonnades. the golden hour sunset casts long, beautiful shadows across the pavement. Musicians play soft tunes near the luxury goods stalls. People walk slowly, enjoying the cooling breeze from the sea. Friends greet each other under the tall columns. The harsh glare of the day softens into a warm, inviting glow. The avenue feels less like a road, and more like a massive, shared living room. The sound of footsteps and quiet laughter fills the air. It is a time to relax and simply exist in the city. The marble pillars glow faintly in the fading evening light. On the corners of the avenue, street food creates a sensory overload. Small charcoal braziers smoke heavily in the dusk. Vendors sell roasted pigeon and heavily salted fish on sticks. The glowing embers cast a warm light on the stone street corners. The smell of salt, smoke and roasting meat is irresistible. The vendors wrap the hot food in discarded scraps of papyrus. If you look closely, you might see old tax records on your wrapper. Sometimes, your dinner comes wrapped in a fragment of ancient poetry. It is a practical, beautiful recycling of the city's endless paperwork. The hot grease makes the old ink run and blur. People eat while they walk, enjoying the rich, simple flavors. The smoke drifts up into the darkening sky, mixing with the sea air. It is a humble, delicious end to a long day. The braziers glow brighter as the night falls. Away from the quiet streets, the chariot racing factions create fierce tribalism. The Legion Hippodrome is a massive stadium of sweeping stone bleachers. During the day, it is a deafening sea of screaming fans. They do not just cheer for the drivers. They wear the specific colors of their chosen factions. The crowd is divided into blues, greens, reds and whites. The bleachers become a segregated, shifting ocean of dyed wool. But at dawn, the stadium is completely empty and silent. A few discarded scraps of bright blue and green cloth remain on the steps. The quiet light reveals the sheer scale of the empty arena. The echoes of the crowd are gone, replaced by the wind. It is strange to see such a passionate place so still. The stone seats wait patiently for the next explosion of color. The tribal loyalty sleeps until the next race begins. Inside the royal courts, a very different kind of entertainment takes place. The lavish marble halls echo with strange, mechanical music. This is the sound of the hydraulis, an early pipe organ. It was invented right here in the city. The complex instrument uses water pressure to force air through bronze pipes. It creates a loud, continuous and unearthly sound. The music accompanies the grand royal banquets. The large copper water tank sits quietly in the empty hall during the day. The bronze pipes gleam in the soft daylight. It looks more like a piece of plumbing than a musical instrument. Yet, it produces a rich, powerful tone that fills the massive space. The invention shows the city's love for blending art and engineering. The music is precise, mechanical, and deeply fascinating. The silent pipes wait for the water to breathe life into them again. The scholars of the Alcyon share a much quieter evening meal. They do not just work together, they live in a highly structured commune. Every evening, the greatest minds of the age gather in a grand dining hall. Mathematicians, poets, and engineers sit side by side at long, polished wooden tables. They eat a simple, communal meal from terracotta bowls. The entire gathering is funded by the royal treasury. Warm evening lamplight flickers against the frescoed walls. The room hums with low, intense conversations about the universe. There is no loud music here, only the clinking of spoons and the exchange of ideas. It is a peaceful, intellectual sanctuary. The scholars debate the stars while breaking bread together. The oil lamps cast a soft golden glow over the quiet room. This shared meal grounds their lofty thoughts in simple, human routine. The treasury pays for their food, buying the world's progress. As night deepens, the city's grandest temple becomes a nocturnal hospital. Weary pilgrims seek cures in the quiet halls of the Serapeum. They participate in a ritual known as incubation. The pilgrims sleep overnight in specially darkened, peaceful stone chambers. Simple woven sleeping mats rest on the cool, smooth stone floors. Soft moonlight filters through high, small windows. The pilgrims hope the god will visit them in their dreams. They wait for a gentle whisper offering medical advice or a miraculous cure. The temple is completely silent, filled only with the sound of slow breathing. It is a place of deep hope and quiet vulnerability. The cool night air brings relief to the sick and tired. The darkness feels protective, wrapping around the sleeping figures. They surrender their ailments to the mysteries of the night. The moonlight moves slowly across the floor as the hours pass. High above the sleeping city, the astronomers begin their work. They thrive in the quietest, darkest hours of the night. On the high terraces of the Alcyon, scholars sit in the cool air. They use complex brass astrolabes and long sighting tubes. They meticulously map the movement of the stars against the black sky. The Mediterranean night is clear and vast. A single oil lamp provides just enough light to read their charts. The large brass armillary spheres point toward the heavens. The astronomers track the slow, silent rotation of the universe. They measure angles and record positions with absolute precision. The city below is dark, but the sky is alive with information. It is a lonely, beautiful pursuit of knowledge. The cool wind blows off the sea, chilling the flat stone rooftop. They watch the stars until the very first hint of dawn appears. The only light brighter than the stars comes from the harbor. The nighttime coastline is defined by the sweeping glow of the Pharos. High up in the massive tower, attendants work through the night. They constantly feed a roaring fire with dried scrub brush. The flames burn brightly in a deep stone alcove. A giant, curved shield of polished bronze sits behind the fire. This mirror projects the beam up to 30 miles out to sea. It creates a rhythmic, intense flash that guides ships through the dangerous reefs. The firelight reflects off the bronze, creating a blinding, warm glow. The attendants sweat in the heat, keeping the flames alive. It is a beacon of safety in the dark water. The sweeping light touches the waves, the docks, and the sleeping city. It is a steady, comforting pulse that watches over the edge of the world. The story of this coastal city begins with a strange and quiet morning on the sand. Alexander the Great stood by the sea and planned his new capital. He had no chalk to mark the streets. Instead, he used handfuls of white barley grain to lay out the vast grid. Birds swooped down to eat the seeds as soon as they fell. Seers told him this meant his city would feed the whole world. But the young king never saw the grand streets that took his name. He left for his long campaigns in Asia right after that morning. He died far away, years before the first great temples were finished. He only returned to these streets much later. They brought him back as a quiet corpse, resting inside a heavy golden box. You can almost picture that flat expanse of dirt. The sea breeze blows the dust. The barley lines fade into the earth. Those early streets grew into distinct neighborhoods with a very subtle code. The planners organized the 5 main districts using the first 5 letters of the Greek alphabet. They called them Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, and Epsilon. It seemed like a simple way to keep track of the growing population. But local storytellers shared a quiet secret about those names. They claimed the letters formed a hidden acronym. If you read them together, they stood for a proud phrase. It meant, Alexander, king, seed of Zeus, founded this city. The residents walked through these lettered zones every day. They bought bread in Delta, and visited friends in Beta. The alphabet became a map of their daily lives. It was a clever trick hidden in plain sight. The stones themselves carried the memory of the founder. You can imagine the carved markers standing in the sun. The deep Greek letters cast sharp shadows on the white marble. That same alphabet soon solved a massive problem in the city's most famous building. The Great Library held thousands of rolled papyrus scrolls. The sheer volume of knowledge became completely overwhelming. A scholar named Xenodotus stared at the endless piles of texts. He needed a way to find specific works without unrolling every single one. So he looked at the first letter of each author's name. He grouped all the scrolls by those letters. It was a simple idea, but it changed the world. He invented alphabetical order just because they had too many books. Scholars could finally walk up to a wooden table and find exactly what they needed. Small wooden tags hung from the ends of the scrolls. Each tag bore a neat Greek letter. The quiet rustle of papyrus filled the cool rooms. The vast chaos of human thought was finally tamed by a few simple shapes. The collection grew so large because of a very strange local law. The royal rulers wanted every book in the world. They'd passed a decree that affected every ship docking in the Great Harbor. Guards searched the cargo of every visiting vessel. If they found any books, they simply took them. The customs agents brought the texts to the scholars. Scribes carefully copied every word onto fresh papyrus. Then, they gave the cheap new copies back to the angry ship owners. The library kept the precious originals for themselves. They even added a special label to these stolen scrolls. They marked them with a tag that read, "From the ships." You can picture the stone counters at the busy docks. Stacks of old sea-worn scrolls sat next to piles of blank papyrus. The smell of salt water mixed with the dry scent of ink. The city built its wisdom through quiet, polite theft. People often think that vast collection vanished in one dramatic apocalyptic fire. The real story of its end is much slower and much sadder. The great institution simply died over centuries of quiet neglect. Rulers cut the budget for the scholars. Bureaucrats stopped paying for building repairs. Political priorities shifted away from learning and toward war. The roof leaked, and the damp air crept into the storage rooms. The fragile papyrus scrolls slowly rotted away on their wooden shelves. No one bothered to copy the decaying texts onto fresh pages. The grand halls grew dusty and empty. Spiders spun webs across the carved wall niches. The greatest mind trust of the ancient world faded away in the dark. It was not a sudden tragedy, but a long, slow sigh. You can imagine the grey light filtering into a forgotten room. A few crumbling scrolls rest on the stone floor, too fragile to touch. Before the decline, those quiet courtyards hosted moments of pure genius. A scholar named Eratosthenes used the simplest tools to measure the entire world. He planted a plain wooden stick vertically in the flat stone ground. He watched the sharp shadow it cast under the harsh midday sun. He knew that in a southern town on that exact same day, the sun cast no shadow at all. The light there fell straight down a deep well. He measured the angle of his local shadow. With just that angle and the distance between the two towns, he did the math. He calculated the circumference of the Earth with astonishing accuracy. He did not need a ship or a telescope. He only needed a stick, a shadow, and a quiet place to think. The sun moved slowly across the courtyard. The shadow shifted slightly on the warm stone. The size of the planet was revealed. Other scholars looked inward, exploring the hidden maps of the human body. Medical researchers worked in calm, quiet anatomy theaters. A brilliant doctor named Herophilus made discoveries that changed medicine forever. He was the first person to accurately map the human nervous system. He traced the delicate pathways that run from the brain to the limbs. He even figured out the difference between sensory nerves and motor nerves. He understood how we feel a gentle breeze and how we move our hands. The work required immense patience and a steady hand. You can picture his wooden table bathed in soft window light. Unrolled scrolls show detailed drawings of the body. Polished bronze medical tools rest nearby. The room is silent except for the scratch of a reed pen. He sat in the quiet city and mapped the very wires that make us alive. It was a profound moment of human understanding. Practical problems also found elegant solutions in these busy workshops. The famous inventor Archimedes spent time living here before returning to Greece. He saw local farmers struggling to water their crops. They needed to move water from the low-lying Nile Delta up to their fields. So he designed a brilliant new tool. He built a large wooden cylinder with a spiral screw mechanism inside. A farmer could place one end in a muddy ditch and turn a hand crank. The spinning spiral pulled the water up the tube in a steady stream. It was a simple, perfect machine. People still use this exact design all over the world today. You can imagine the heavy wooden device resting at an angle in the reeds. The bright daylight catches the water spilling from the top. The rhythmic creak of the turning wood blends with the sound of the river. The fields grew green and lush. Another local engineer found a way to measure and manage time itself. A man named Catacombs built the world's first mechanical alarm clock. He started with a standard water clock, which used dripping water to track the hours. Then, he added a clever floating mechanism inside the bronze tank. As the water level rose, the float moved higher. At a specific, preset time, the float triggered a small lever. The lever tipped a tray, dropping tiny pebbles onto a polished bronze gong. The gentle, ringing sound would wake the user from their sleep. It was a beautiful, delicate piece of engineering. You can picture it sitting on a carved wooden table. The warm, flickering light of an oil lamp shines on the glass and metal. The water drips with a slow, calming rhythm. The small pebbles wait in their tray. The city slept, trusting a machine to wake them for the dawn. Later, a brilliant inventor named Heron built machines that seemed like pure magic. He actually invented the very first steam engine. He created a hollow brass sphere with two bent nozzles on opposite sides. He suspended the sphere over a small cauldron of boiling water. The steam rose into the sphere and shot out of the bent tubes. The force made the polished brass ball spin wildly in the air. It was a marvel of physics and heat. But no one ever thought to hook it up to machinery. They never used it to grind grain or pump water. They simply treated it as a fascinating toy. You can imagine the warm firelight in his workshop. The water bubbles in the cauldron. The brass sphere hums as it whirls in the dark room. The Industrial Revolution was right there, spinning on a table. But the city just watched it with quiet delight. Heron also designed a device that changed how people traveled. He invented the ancient equivalent of a modern taximeter. He built a complex geared mechanism that attached directly to a cart's wooden axle. As the cart rolled down the road, the axle turned the small bronze gears. After exactly 1 mile of travel, the gears triggered a release. A single small pebble dropped into a polished metal box with a sharp click. Travelers could simply count the pebbles at the end of the day. It allowed them to measure their long journeys with perfect accuracy. You can picture the beautifully crafted wooden axle in the sunlit workshop. The small bronze teeth mesh together perfectly. The metal box waits for the next stone to fall. The device turned the endless dusty roads into neat, measurable numbers. It was a quiet, steady rhythm of progress. The miles ticked by, one pebble at a time. That same mechanical genius even found its way into the local shrines. Heron invented what was essentially the world's first vending machine. He built a tall, ornate bronze urn for dispensing holy water. A worshipper would drop a heavy bronze coin into a small slot at the top. The coin fell and hit a balanced lever inside the dark urn. The weight of the metal pushed the lever down. This opened a small valve at the bottom of the tank. Exactly 1 handful of holy water flowed out before the coin slid off. The valve snapped shut, ready for the next person. You can see the tall urn sitting in a quiet, shadowy alcove. Soft daylight touches the polished bronze surface. The small spout waits at the bottom. The faithful got their blessing, and the priests kept their water safe. It was a perfect blend of deep faith and clever plumbing. The grandest illusion Heron created was reserved for the massive temple doors. He engineered a hidden system that made the heavy bronze gates open by themselves. A priest would light a fire on an altar outside the temple. The heat from the fire warmed the air in a hidden chamber below. The expanding air pushed water from a tank into a large bucket. As the bucket grew heavy, it pulled on a complex series of ropes. The ropes turned wooden cylinders, which magically swung the massive doors open. The worshippers stood baffled and amazed by the power of the gods. When the fire died, the water flowed back, and the doors slowly closed. You can picture the dark space beneath the stone floor. The hidden ropes pull tight in the shadows. The firelight flickers on the heavy bronze doors above. The heavy hinges groan softly in the quiet, smoky air. The gods of this city had a very practical sense of style. The patron god was named Serapis, and he represented the endless wealth of the region. Statues of him stood in temples and public squares. He was always carved as a majestic, bearded figure. But he wore a very specific mundane hat on top of his curls. It was called a modius, and it was literally just a standard wooden bucket. It was the exact type of bucket merchants used for measuring grain in the markets. The city fed the entire empire with its massive wheat harvests. The bucket was a symbol of that endless, golden food supply. You can imagine a close view of a marble statue's head. Soft, diffused daylight falls on the carved stone. The cylindrical bucket sits firmly on the god's head. It was a quiet reminder that true divine power was a full stomach. The harbor was guided by a structure so famous it changed how we speak. A massive, multi-tiered white limestone tower stood on a rocky island. It was the great lighthouse, and the island itself was named Pharos. The bright fire at the top burned every night, guiding ships safely to the docks. The building became so iconic that its name shifted meaning entirely. The word Pharos became the actual word for lighthouse in many European languages. You can still hear it today in French as phare. It lives on in Italian and Spanish as faro. The Portuguese call it faro. The island gave its name to the light it held. You can picture the massive white tower dominating the skyline. Bright, clear daylight strikes the pale stone. The sea crashes against the rocky base. The building is gone, but its name still shines on every dark coast in the world. Some famous monuments in the city carry names that are completely wrong. Two massive red granite obelisks stood near the water for centuries. People all over the world know them today as Cleopatra's Needles. But they had absolutely nothing to do with the famous queen. A pharaoh named Thutmose III carved them 1,000 years before she was even born. They stood in a different city for centuries. Workers only moved them to this coast after Cleopatra had already died. The name was just a romantic story that stuck. You can picture the two ancient stones standing awkwardly in front of a newer Roman temple. Bright daylight reveals the deeply weathered hieroglyphs on the red granite. The tall, sharp points reach into the blue sky. They are silent witnesses to a history much older than the city itself. They keep their true past hidden behind a famous, borrowed name. The royal rulers of this coast lived in a state of absolute, staggering luxury. The kings built a pleasure ship so absurdly large, it was basically a floating city block. They called it the Thalamagos, and it was a massive river barge. It was used solely for slow, relaxing cruises up and down the Nile. The wooden deck featured a grand dining hall lined with real marble columns. It had a lush winter garden filled with potted trees. There was even a small stone temple dedicated to Aphrodite on board. You can imagine the sheer scale of the ship resting on the calm water. Warm sunset light hits the marble pillars and the green leaves. The gentle current pushes against the wide wooden hull. The rulers drifted through the desert in a floating palace. It was a quiet, slow-moving world of perfect comfort, completely detached from the dusty shores. The kings also maintained a sprawling military zone dedicated entirely to exotic animals. They called this specialized district the Camp of the Elephants. The rulers imported massive African elephants to use in their grand armies. They built this huge complex just to house and train the giant beasts. The stables were heavily reinforced with thick stone walls. The workers carved enormous feeding troughs out of solid limestone blocks. You can picture the quiet, monumental stable complex in the warm afternoon sunlight. Massive stone pillars support wide, shady archways. The huge carved troughs sit empty in the dust. The air would have smelled of dry hay and warm earth. The heavy footsteps of the animals once shook the ground here. It was a strange, quiet neighborhood built for giants. The city made room for the wild, wrapping it in neat stone walls and feeding it by the ton. Despite all their wealth, the royal family remained strangely isolated from their own people. The dynasty ruled the country for 300 years. Yet, the kings and queens only spoke Greek. They never bothered to learn the native tongue of the people they governed. That finally changed with Cleopatra. She was the very first ruler of her line to actually speak to her subjects in their own language. She learned Egyptian, along with 8 other languages, to connect with the wider world. You can imagine her empty, opulent throne room in the quiet hours. A golden chair sits in the center of the floor. The walls are painted with a mix of Greek geometric patterns and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Warm afternoon sun slants across the silent room. She broke a 3-century silence just by learning a few new words. She chose to finally listen to the voices outside the palace walls. Behind those palace walls, she and Mark Antony lived a very different kind of life. They formed what was essentially a literal frat house in the royal quarters. They started a private drinking club and called themselves the Inimitable Livers. The group was dedicated to throwing absurdly elaborate feasts that lasted until dawn. They loved playing elaborate pranks on the local citizens. They would even wander the dark city streets in disguise at night, causing quiet trouble. You can picture the lavish banquet hall in total disarray after a party. Overturned silver wine goblets rest on the beautiful mosaic floor. Scattered grapes and discarded flower garlands lie in the shadows. The dim light of dying oil lamps casts long shapes on the walls. The most powerful people in the world just wanted to play games in the dark. The heavy burdens of the empire were forgotten until the sun came up. Years earlier, Julius Caesar faced a much less relaxing moment in these same waters. During a fierce battle in the harbor, enemy forces overran his ship. He had to dive into the dark water and swim for his life. Legend says he managed to do it, using only one arm. He allegedly held his precious military journals high above his head, with one hand. He used his other arm to paddle through the chaotic waves to safety. He refused to let his written words sink into the mud. You can imagine the dark, choppy waters of the great harbor. Overcast. Dramatic light filters through the gray clouds. A small, tightly bound stack of wax tablets rests on a piece of floating driftwood. The cold water splashes against the wood. The great general kicked through the brine, saving his own story before he saved himself. The sea kept everything else. The regular citizens of the city were not easily impressed by these famous rulers. In fact, the Romans considered them to be the most sarcastic people in the ancient world. The residents were famous across the empire for their biting, relentless wit. They constantly wrote satirical poetry and posted it on public notice boards. When powerful emperors came to visit, the locals gave them absurd, mocking nicknames. The rulers simply had to endure the jokes and smile. You can picture a quiet corner of the grand marble marketplace. A few citizens in linen tunics stand near a wooden notice board. They are reading freshly painted verses that make fun of the latest royal decree. The grand marble columns rise up around them. The city used humor as a quiet kind of armor. They built grand monuments, but they never took the people who paid for them too seriously. The streets also saw moments of quiet, bold defiance from brilliant minds. The most famous female scholar of the era was a mathematician named Hypatia. In a time when women were expected to stay hidden at home, she refused. She famously drove her own chariot through the busy streets. She wore the rough, simple cloak of a philosopher, a garment usually reserved for men. She rode through the city to teach crowds about math and the stars. You can imagine her simple wooden chariot resting quietly on a stone-paved street. The rough wool cloak is draped casually over the wooden rail. Warm afternoon sun warms the worn paving stones. She claimed her space in the world with calm, steady confidence. The rattle of her chariot wheels was a sound of pure freedom. She mapped the heavens and drove her own path through the dust of the royal quarter. Local artisans were just as brilliant as the scholars, changing how the world looked. Glassmakers in the workshops invented the very first invisible glass. Most ancient glass was cloudy and thick, tinted green by iron impurities in the sand. But these craftsmen figured out a chemical secret. They realized that adding antimony or manganese to the molten mix would neutralize the color. This created perfectly clear, transparent glass centuries before anyone else in the world. You can picture a perfectly clear glass goblet resting on a rough wooden workbench. A single beam of sunlight catches the rim, making it glow. The glass is so pure it almost looks like frozen water. The dusty workshop is filled with the heat of the kilns. They took ordinary sand and turned it into something like thin air. It was a quiet, beautiful magic born from fire and patience. Much of this incredible world was eventually buried and forgotten under the sand. The spectacular catacombs of el-Shukafa were lost for many centuries. They were finally discovered in the year 1900 by pure, clumsy accident. A donkey was hauling a heavy cart across the dry ground. The animal simply stepped on a weak spot and fell through the earth. It dropped directly into the main access shaft of the massive ancient tomb. The ground opened up to reveal a hidden city of the dead. You can imagine the dusty, collapsed hole in the desert ground. Bright daylight pours into the dark, carved stone shaft below. A broken wooden cartwheel rests near the crumbling edge. The deep silence of the tomb meets the bright, noisy world above. A simple misstep brought the ancient past back into the light. The city is always waiting just beneath your feet. Our walk through ancient Alexandria is coming to an end. Wherever you've drifted to, you don't need to come back. There's nothing more to listen for tonight. Sleep well.